1. This all happened a bit of a long time ago, so please bear with me as this is a completely true story that I verified with my family over the holiday. Granted, it's something we'd all like to forget, but here it is, all the same. I'm 19 now and in college, but I originally grew up in a small town in New England. The area is basically in the middle of a few game refuges, and is surrounded by farms, fields, forests, and mountains as far as the eye can see. It's beautiful in the fall, but can be annoyingly creepy at night. Honestly, there is a local legend about a Blair Witch cabin on a trail near my house that is legitimately a Pokestop. But I digress. This all may seem irrelevant, but what you need to understand is that crime wasn't something that normally happened. At all. There was the occasional car robbery, but they would usually just turn themselves in when they figured out that someone knew another person whose car they had robbed. And they would get in more trouble with their mother than the authorities if they didn't turn themselves in. Yeah, it's that kind of a town. We all felt safe, generally. My mom was always overly cautious, though. She'd always walk my brother, sister, and myself down to the end of the street while we waited for the bus to pick us up for school. We didn't mind too much, as we've always lived on a street that literally had no other kids. It was, and still is, all just older people. It was like having about 9 extra grandparents who would often give us sweets and other goodies. That being said, we didn't really play with any other kids on the regular. We normally just read books and entertained ourselves. So you can understand that we liked having our mother to talk to while we waited for the bus. If I got the year right, my brother was about 9 at the time, my sister 5, and myself 7. So we were young, but not incredibly so. Not to sound completely narcissistic, but we basically looked like the perfect set of children. My brother and I looked like twins, all smiles and both of our 2 front teeth missing. And my sister was the perfect picture of rosy cheeks and cherry sundresses. She would actually be stopped occasionally on vacation to take pictures with Japanese tourists who thought she was a little toddler model. One day, on our way out to the bus, we opened the side door of our house and saw a small pile of pennies on the doormat. We were thrilled, as we thought the leprechaun had come back to give us more coins. A family friend had shared one of their family traditions with us just the previous week. If you leave a potato on the doorstep on the eve of St. Patrick's Day, then a leprechaun will give you a sack of coins in exchange for his favorite meal. The whole idea of getting money, even a measly 27 cents, was exciting for us, and we were all happy to take the coins. Our mom didn't see a problem with it and assumed that our dad had left them there before he left for work that morning. No one really suspected anything at the time. Naturally, though, we all know that's total bullshit, especially since it's this subreddit. For the next couple of weeks, the piles kept showing up on our doorstep, and slowly began to trail down the driveway, stopping at the end for a few days, before trailing down the street to where our bus usually stops every morning. At this point, my parents began to freak out, and rightly so, after discovering that my dad hadn't left the pile of coins. They began to ask the sweet elderly neighbors whether or not they had left us the coins. Every single one said no. We stopped taking the coins after that. The pile of coins at the end of the street grew and grew in size over the next few weeks. This had been going on for a month or so at this point. The coins were always there, and they were clearly meant for us, but no one was in sight. You're probably wondering why my parents didn't call the police at this point. Well, they didn't want to cause them any trouble. My mother's words, not my own. One day, however, they did end up having to call. We were all standing at the end of the road, beside the ominous pile of coins, when a grey sedan pulled up from behind the tree line and parked across the road from our street. We would have thought this was normal, as many people park there to take hikes. But the car didn't have any plates. The only way this vehicle could have been more nondescript would have been if it were painted camouflage. The clincher for us was the red scarf we saw tied to the car's side mirror. It was the same one we had tied onto our mailbox to let the bus driver know if we were all sick and wouldn't be coming to school that day. It had been stolen months ago. An investigation took place and nothing really came of it. But once the police began monitoring the house, the coins stopped coming and the car never came back. If my mother wasn't as careful with us as she was, we would have been kidnapped faster than you could blink. After thinking more about it, we came to the conclusion that he was probably after my baby sister, the one with the wide eyes and perfect apple plum cheeks. She's 16 now and can't remember any of this, but it's honestly terrifying to think about how she, my little sister, could have been gone forever. The part that scares me the most about this is that this guy wasn't your usual kidnapper. He was patient. He waited for months and months to try and get his hands on us. He watched our house, our family, for months trying to find an opportunity. He watched us walk to the end of the street every morning for the bus. He knew when we were sick. He saw us leave the potato out on our doorstep for the leprechaun. And he knew how to reel us in. The asshole knew everything, and we'll never know how. Soon after, our dad thought it would be safer to having us trained in self-defense. And although it may sound like I'm making this up, my siblings and I now all have training in Shaolin Kempo, 2 of us sporting 2nd degree black belts. Basically, my tiny sister could throw a grown man over her shoulder at the age of 11, if you could believe it. I don't really want to know where this douchebag is, but don't let any kids fall for the coin trick, like we almost did. So, creepy leprechaun impersonator, if you're out there, let's not meet again. For your own sake. 2. Okay, typically when I tell this story to my friends, it comes out as a funny, weird joke, but in reality, it's fucking scary. I'll start off by pointing out that this happened a couple years ago. I was 15, going on 16, junior year of high school. It was around 3 p.m, so it was sunny outside, and I was getting off the bus stop that was just a couple blocks away from my house. Right in front of this bus stop, there was a gas station where a group of men sold cell phone accessories. Every day I would pass by there, they would catcall me, but I ignored it. Mind you, these men were 25 plus years old while I was 15. The men were pretty recognizable, since I saw them a lot, but one of them looked different. I had never seen him before. I passed right by them. He didn't catcall me, but he did stare at me and we made eye contact. Never did I suspect what came from that. As I continued to walk, I felt that feeling we all know, the one where someone is just behind you or looking at you, and I took a quick glimpse back and realized he was following me, yelling, "Hey!" I ignored it and kept walking. I was actually walking really fast because I was scared. He kept screaming and hollering at me, until he finally caught up to me, thanks to a fucking car stopping in front of me. Once he caught up to me, he said, "Wow, you walk fast. I've been trying to talk to you since back there." And I made small talk like, "Oh," and "okay," to anything he would say. From the compliments to the weird questions like, "Can I walk you home?" I told him no, that my dad would get mad. And he said, "Oh, I understand." Okay, from there I thought that was it. But it wasn't. It so happens he knew a guy that I also knew, and managed to get my Facebook out of him. The next day that man added me on Facebook, and I didn't approve it because I was scared of how he found me. He messaged me continuously and I wouldn't reply. Once I saw him again a couple days after the messages. and he seemed mad at me for not replying to his messages, to which I quickly lied and said I hadn't been on Facebook. Okay, I don't know what it was, but I was scared of him. I was scared of him doing something to me if I didn't reply to him, since I do walk in my neighborhood on the daily, and was bound to see him again. So I replied. I thought maybe I can have him as an acquaintance and that's it. But that's not what he wanted. He would ask me for my number and these sort of things on Facebook, but I always refused. But one day I got a text saying, "Hi, beautiful," and I replied with, "Who's this?" just to get the scariest response ever, a selfie of his. I didn't know what to think. Every day after that, he would call me and text me 1,000,000,000 times a day. He would leave me voicemails and messages at least 15 times a day. Sometimes they were angry. He would complain to why I'm ignoring him and would ask me for pictures of my toes. Yeah, I don't know. The day it got even scarier was when I was walking to the same bus stop, and he came out of nowhere and said, well, just the person I wanted to see." But the way he said it was weird. He said it with hate, but covered with a giggle. I said to him, "I'm late to school," and he followed me, again. He tried to hug me, and I just stood there. I did nothing. And he tried to kiss me on the cheek. I can't remember if he succeeded or not, but I do remember him trying. Not to mention the texts that contained a combination of angriness, admiration, and sexual content, explaining what he would want to do with me or to me. The messages and voicemails continued. "Hi, baby girl. How are you? I'm just calling to make sure you're okay. I miss you. I really like you. Have you ate? If you drank water, call me back." Like, what the fuck? You didn't even know me. How did you miss and like me? I don't know why I hadn't told my parents about him. He was a 27-year-old man taunting me. Until one night I had enough. I was in my room and I heard whistling outside. I looked out the window and he was standing across the street, just staring into my house. He never tried to come in, but how the fuck did he know exactly where I lived? I messaged him and told him to leave me alone and that I had a boyfriend. It took him a while to stop messaging me, but he did, and I didn't see him for about 4 years. Until this year. I was in the car, and I drove past a man on a bike. When I realized it was him, we made the same eye contact the first time he saw me in the bus stop. As I kept going past him, he turned back, just staring at the car. Haven't seen him since. It's been a couple months. On that note, creepy obsessive perv, let's not meet again. Ever again. 3. Since I'm at home now because of my fibro disability, I've got a lot of time to read these chilling tales. It also gives me time to look back at my own past, remember some of my own scary moments. I have several more stories to tell and share. This was one of those memories that I remembered and wanted to share. Back in 2007, I started a tech job with a IP phone VoIP DT1 long-distance company. The company is no longer around, and honestly, I don't know how they stayed in business as long as they did. It was really a pyramid scheme, but thankfully I was on the IT side of things, so I didn't have to sell anything. It was a small, typical tech support call center. The customers would call in, or Verizon, Quest, etc., would call and say DT1 lines were down or outages. I was the only female on my team, having to prove myself and show that I can do anything my male counterparts could. It didn't take long, and the customers respected me for being able to handle things. After making my mark, I decided to take the 10-hour night shifts. I worked Wednesday to Saturday from 1 p.m. to 12 a.m., an hour lunch. And after 6 p.m., I was completely alone in the whole building. The rush to get out of the office by 6 p.m. was insane. I couldn't blame them. But I decided having 3 days off was better than 2. Like I said, I was by myself for most of the night. I would have to keep an eye on the emails and make sure I answered calls. It was a very slow shift. I would get a lot of video game, reading, schoolwork, writing during this time. But sometimes I would just wander the building, walk all around just to get away from my desk for a time. I would have the VoIP phone system connected to my cell phone, so no calls would be missed. This allowed me to get a soda, go get food, and so on. One time I was up away from my desk. I was going down to the lunchroom to grab a soda. The vending machine was on the basement floor. The basement had a wall of windows and one set of security doors. Same for the main entrance, only there was one camera facing the door. Nothing else really to make you feel very safe. I didn't like going to the basement much, because the back of the building faced an acre of dark woods. There was a walking path to the woods, but for some reason, they didn't install lights for the walking path. Never really sure why that was, but it didn't help the creepy factor. Sometimes I would see animals run past, but other times, I felt like someone was watching me. I always tried my best to make it fast when getting a soda or snack, but sometimes it didn't feel fast enough. So one night I was making my way down to the basement of the building to get a soda. It was a slow, dragging night, and needed a little caffeine for a pick-me-up. I counted my money as I walked, to make sure I had enough to get in and out quick. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw something dart from the glass door back into the darkness. I stopped dead in my tracks and tried to scan the forest, but like I said, it was just blackness. I felt a bit of unease and everything told me to turn on my heels and go back to my desk. But it was 9 p.m. and I had a fair bit of time left on my shift before I could blow this pop stand. I tried shaking the feelings off and briskly walked over to the soda machine and made my selection. The soda dropped, and as I bent down to get it, I heard a loud ping noise. It was as if someone had hit the glass with something. I stood straight up and felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I slowly turned around and was scared to see someone out there. But as I made the full turn, I saw once again nothing but darkness. I thought this was a good time to book it back up to the main floor. I didn't bother with the elevator. I went to the stairs and ran up them. My heart was already racing from having to go down there in the first place. Then the loud bang, and now running up 2 flights of stairs. Once I was back at my desk, I sunk down in my chair and tried to calm down. It was just one noise. I was in a building with locked doors and locked inner offices. I kept saying over and over in my head it was nothing. I was relieved by that, but out of nowhere I got that feeling of someone watching me again. I peeked up over my cubicle wall and looked around my office. Nothing seemed out of place, until I turned to face the front of the building. Outside in the first set of doors was a slender, tall, dirty male. He was cupping his hands around his eyes to try and see past the reflecting of the lights inside. I dropped back down in my cubicle before he caught sight of me. He didn't look like anyone I have ever seen at the office, and it was a little past 9 p.m. There is no good reason why he is checking out my office. As I sit in my chair, I hear the doors shake. I slowly stood up and watched him pull at the handles of the doors. They didn't budge, to my relief. But as I watched him, he turned to face me. His face looked bruised or dirty. I couldn't tell which. Once his eyes locked onto mine, he started to bang harder and smacked the glass. I was so scared. It was the middle of the night, I was by myself, and out in the middle of this office building complex. I grabbed my headset and dialed 911. While getting the operator on the line, the guy was walking back and forth from one side of the glass doors to the next. 911, what is your emergency? The lady's voice was direct. Yes, I told her my name and where I worked. I need someone to come out. There is a guy trying to break into my office building." While speaking with her, the guy disappeared from view. I tried to look in all directions, but I didn't see him. I knew that he wouldn't just walk off, not with how hard he was banging. Out of nowhere, a good-sized rock came out of nowhere and smashed against the door. I screamed and went under my desk. The operator asked what just happened, and I explained that a rock smashed against the glass door. She asked me if the glass was broken enough to let him in. I didn't want to stand up and look, but she told me to look in order to know where he was now. I crawled out from under my desk and just peeked over my wall and saw a huge crack down the first part of the door. I sank back down and told her to please have the police hurry. She said they were on their way. I've read many of these stories on this subreddit, and people say that the cops couldn't get there fast enough. They aren't kidding. It feels like time is standing still and you can do nothing. Another smash against the door. But along with that glass-breaking sound, sirens could be heard coming towards my building. It was music to my ears. I told the operator that the police had arrived and thanked her for all her support. I stood back up and looked over the cubicle wall to see the red-blue lights were flashing wildly. But the thing I didn't see was the man. The top part of the door was completely smashed, and the rock was laying on the inside of the entryway. One officer came to the front door, and others were out combing the area. I could see their flashlights moving all around the parking lot. The first officer to come in the building and greet me was a very kind man. He was patient with me, and let me explain what I saw happen. Soon my boss arrived and checked on me, then the damage. At some point my husband was called and told I would be escorted home by one of the officers. I took the next few days off and started to look for another job that wasn't by myself at night. When I gave my statement, I explained to the officer that the person could be partnered with an ex-co-worker who was fired a few weeks prior for stealing and just not showing up. He knew when people came and went. He knew where we kept the cell phones we were selling. Not under lock and key, but under a desk of the provisioner. From smartphones to Blackberries, when they were still worth buying. Plus VoIP boxes and phone cards. I went on to leave this job a month later, and started at a credit card machine company. It was an office full of people. Still a call center. But I felt safer, especially with the security cameras all over the building. Like I said before, this company is no longer around. It was bought up by another company, and they basically liquidated all the funds that were worth something. So, dirty man who tried to break into my office, let's never meet again. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 172. Thank you very much to everyone who allowed me to use their stories in this video. So as I was recording this, I was doing the Sunday and Monday videos together, and I hadn't realized at the time, but the stories I'd picked to do for my Monday video, the second one was actually the one you heard yesterday. The second one was the one you heard yesterday with the concert that took place in Ireland in the field. And right before that was going to be the one with the leprechaun and the pennies. So I thought that might be a bit awkward if I was to put those two together. So I swapped a couple of stories over and I put that one in today's video, where I think it fits much better anyway. Okay, and with that I think I'm going to head off for now. I'm sorry to cut the outro brief. I know I've been cutting them brief quite a bit recently. It's just, just throat troubles, trying to keep the talking to a minimum. So I'm going to rest my voice so that I can continue making videos for the rest of the week. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.